Fame opens doors most people never see, and for some R&B stars, it opened the wrong ones. Behind the smooth vocals and love songs were patterns of cheating they couldn't break. These are 20 R&B stars who couldn't stop cheating, even when everything was on the line. 1.
It's hard to break, I must say, yeah.
Eric Benet's story is one of those Hollywood situations that still makes people shake their heads years later. In the early 2000s, he and Halle Berry looked like the definition of a perfect match. They were both talented, attractive, and successful in their own lanes. When they got married in 2001, many fans genuinely believed they were witnessing a rare celebrity love story that would last. Halle was riding the biggest wave of her career after winning an Oscar, and Eric was respected as a soulful, thoughtful R&B artist. From the outside, it seemed like everything had aligned perfectly. But behind that glossy image, cracks were already forming. By 2003, the marriage had come to a sudden end, and people were stunned by how quickly it all fell apart. As details began to surface, it became clear that Eric's infidelity wasn't a one-time mistake. Reports suggested a repeated pattern of cheating, something he later described as an issue he couldn't control at the time. The revelation hit hard, especially because of who Halle Berry was to the public. She wasn't just a famous actress. She was widely loved, admired, and seen as someone who had finally found happiness after years of heartbreak. What made the situation even more striking was how openly it played out afterward. Eric reportedly checked himself into a treatment program to address what was described as a sex addiction, a move that drew both sympathy and criticism. Some saw it as accountability, others as damage control. Either way, the marriage was over, and the damage to his public image was permanent. To this day, Eric Benet's name often comes up as an example of someone who had an extraordinary partner, a promising life, and still managed to lose it all. It's a quiet reminder that fame doesn't protect relationships, and temptation doesn't care how good things look from the outside. 2.
For one another, and that's what's cool.
Sean Stockman built his career on love songs that felt sincere and timeless. As a member of Boyz II Men, his smooth vocals helped define an era, soundtracking school dances, weddings, and heartbreaks for an entire generation. The group's image was clean, romantic, and almost fairy tale-like, and Sean, in particular, came across as a calm, dependable gentleman. Off stage, he was a husband and father, and for years there was nothing about his public life that suggested otherwise. That illusion cracked in 2016 when Sean appeared in a somber video that caught fans completely off guard. Staring straight into the camera, he offered a public apology to his wife, admitting that he had been unfaithful. There was no music, no branding, no polish, just a man owning up to choices that had hurt his family. The confession was jarring, not only because of what he admitted, but because of how openly he did it. This wasn't gossip or leaked information. It was Sean himself confirming the rumors people had whispered about for years. What made the moment linger was the contrast between the man and the music. This was someone who had made a career singing about devotion and forever, now standing in front of the world admitting he hadn't lived up to those lyrics in his own life. Although he and his wife chose to stay together, the episode left a permanent mark on his image. Sean Stockman's story is a reminder that even the smoothest love songs can't shield real relationships from real mistakes, and that fame doesn't make anyone immune to the consequences of betrayal. 3.
Hold up, stumble all in the house, time to back up all of that mouth that you had all in the car, talking about you.
Jay-Z's story is one of the rare moments where the world watched a seemingly untouchable empire show its cracks. For years, Jay-Z and Beyoncé weren't just a couple, they were a symbol. 2 global superstars moving in perfect sync, building wealth, legacy, and cultural dominance together. They were private, controlled, and intentional about what the public saw. To many people, they represented the idea that power and love could coexist without mess. That image started to fracture in 2014 with a single leaked elevator video. Grainy security footage showed Beyoncé's sister, Solange, visibly angry and physically confronting Jay-Z, while Beyoncé stood silently between them. No one said a word publicly at first, but the internet filled the silence with one question: what could make something like this happen behind closed doors? The rumors were loud, and they all pointed in the same direction: infidelity. The confirmation didn't come through interviews or press statements. It came through music. In 2016, Beyoncé released Lemonade, an album that sounded less like entertainment and more like emotional truth. The lyrics spoke of betrayal, anger, humiliation, and pain in a way that felt deeply personal. Becky with the good hair became a cultural phrase overnight, and for the first time, people weren't speculating anymore. They were listening. Jay-Z responded a year later with 4:44, an album that stripped away bravado and ego. He admitted to his failures, spoke about emotional immaturity, and acknowledged how close he came to losing his family. It wasn't offensive or flashy. It was reflective and heavy, like a man finally facing himself. The cheating wasn't framed as a momentary lapse, but as part of a deeper flaw he had to confront. They stayed together, rebuilt, and turned their pain into art and growth. But that chapter changed how people saw Jay-Z forever. It showed that even the most powerful men can sabotage the very things they claim to value most, and that behind every flawless public image, there's a human being capable of making devastating mistakes. For
Addicted to her, she's the sweetest drug. Just
Neo built his entire career on understanding love, heartbreak, and relationships. His songwriting made him famous for sounding emotionally intelligent, like a man who really got women. From So Sick to Miss Independent, to writing Beyoncé's Irreplaceable, his music painted a picture of someone deeply in tune with commitment and respect. Because of that, many people assumed his real life would reflect the same maturity his lyrics carried. But behind the scenes, Neo's relationships kept falling into the same painful pattern. His first marriage to Minetta Shaw, the mother of his 2 children, ended quietly, with few details made public at the time. Years later, he married Crystal Renee in 2016, and their relationship seemed open, loving, and solid. They shared family moments online, spoke publicly about growth and forgiveness, and even renewed their vows in a lavish ceremony, presenting themselves as a couple that had survived challenges and come out stronger. That image collapsed almost overnight. Just months after renewing their vows, Crystal filed for divorce and took to social media with accusations that shocked many fans. She claimed Neo had been unfaithful throughout their entire relationship, describing years of betrayal rather than a single mistake. She went as far as saying he had lived a double life, involving multiple women at the same time, and that the truth had finally become impossible to ignore. What made Neo's story hit harder was a repetition. This wasn't framed as a moment of weakness or a lapse in judgment. It looked like a cycle that followed him from one relationship to the next. The same man who wrote songs about loyalty and independence was now being described as someone who couldn't remain faithful when it mattered most. His situation became a reminder that understanding love on paper doesn't always mean being able to live it in real life, and that sometimes the most convincing love songs are written by people still struggling with their own behavior. 5.
everything that you've been dreaming of. All this is
John Legend has long been held up as the image of the modern, emotionally intelligent husband. His music feels sincere, vulnerable, and deeply romantic, especially All of Me, a song written for his wife Chrissy Teigen that has become one of the most popular wedding songs of all time. Together, they present a relationship that feels playful, supportive, and honest, one that many people point to as an example of what love should look like in the spotlight. What makes John Legend's story interesting is not what happened during his marriage, but what is openly admitted about the man he used to be before it. In 2020, during a candid conversation on a podcast, John spoke honestly about his past relationships and didn't sugarcoat it. He admitted that he'd been unfaithful in almost every serious relationship before meeting Chrissy. At the time, he said, he was selfish, immature, and used the freedom that came with being a musician as an excuse to put his own desires first. The way John tells it, fame wasn't even the main factor back then. He wasn't yet the global superstar he is today. He was simply someone who hadn't learned accountability or emotional discipline. Meeting Chrissy forced him to confront that version of himself. He has said that with her, he knew cheating wasn't something he could hide or explain away. He either had to grow up or lose her completely. Unlike many of the stories where cheating becomes a public scandal, John Legend's is more of a confession than an exposure. It's about a man acknowledging who he was, recognizing the damage that behavior causes, and choosing to change before it destroyed something real. His story stands out because it shows that growth is possible, but only when someone is willing to be honest about their flaws instead of pretending they never from the word confessions, and not just because of the album. For years, he's been one of R&B's most recognizable faces, moving from teenage prodigy to global superstar with ease. His music was emotional, smooth, and vulnerable, often telling stories about love, regret, and temptation. To fans, it felt like he was singing from real experience, even if no one fully knew how close to home those lyrics actually were. In the early 2000s, Usher was in a high-profile relationship with Rosanda Chili Thomas from TLC. They were admired as a beautiful, powerful R&B couple, and many people assumed marriage was a next step. Then, almost suddenly, the relationship ended in 2003. Not long after, Chili spoke openly about what happened, making it clear that infidelity was the breaking point. She explained that cheating was something she would never tolerate, and once trust was broken, there was no going back. What made the situation unforgettable was the timing. Around the same period, Usher released Confessions, an album centered on guilt, betrayal, and a man owning up to his mistakes. Songs about cheating, secrecy, and consequences dominated the project, leading fans to wonder how much it reflected his real life. The line between art and reality became impossible to separate, and many listeners began to hear the album less as fiction and more as emotional truth. Usher went on to achieve massive success, but that chapter followed him. His story became a classic example of life mirroring music, where personal choices quietly shaped some of the most influential songs of an era. It's a reminder that behind the polished performances and perfect vocals, even legends wrestle with the same flaws they sing about, and sometimes the confessions aren't just lyrics, they're lived experiences. 7.
I said, Mister, we can work this out. She said, honey, don't lose control. I tried to get him to...
R. Kelly's story sits in a category of its own because what began as rumors of infidelity later revealed something far more disturbing. At the height of his career, he was one of the most powerful figures in R&B, writing and producing hit after hit, selling millions of records, and presenting himself as a musical genius with complete control over his world. Publicly, he was married, first briefly to Aaliyah in a highly controversial union, and later to his wife Andrea Dree Kelly, with whom he had children. On the surface, it looked like the life of a superstar who had it all. Behind closed doors, however, the reality was very different. Dree Kelly later described a marriage marked by constant infidelity, control, and fear. She said cheating was an occasional mistake, but a regular part of his behavior, with women constantly around him, often fans or much younger women. According to her, trust never truly existed in the marriage, and betrayal became normal rather than shocking. What made it worse was that the cheating wasn't isolated from the rest of his behavior. It was tied into a larger pattern of manipulation and secrecy. As years passed, what many once brushed off as celebrity cheating began to look far more serious. Allegations piled up, stories became harder to ignore, and eventually the world was forced to confront the truth behind the image. In hindsight, the infidelity was not the scandal itself, but an early warning sign. It reflected a man who abused power, ignored boundaries, and lived by his own rules, regardless of who was hurt in the process. R. Kelly's legacy is now inseparable from these revelations. His story is no longer about talent lost to temptation, but about how unchecked fame and control can enable deeply harmful behavior. It stands as a stark reminder that when cheating becomes habitual and normalized, it often points to something far more dangerous beneath the surface. 8. Bobby Brown was never marketed as a quiet, faithful type, and in many ways, that's what made his story so tragic rather than surprising. As the original bad boy of R&B, he carried an image built on rebellion, confidence, and excess. When he married Whitney Houston in 1992, the union felt electric. Two superstars from different worlds colliding, creating one of the most talked about celebrity marriages of the decade. Fans wanted to believe that love had tamed the chaos, that this was a fairy tale with a rough edge. But behind the scenes, the marriage was under constant strain. Bobby has openly admitted, years later, that he was not faithful to Whitney. He spoke candidly about cheating during tours, and while surrounded by the non-stop temptations that came with fame. He often blamed the environment, the lifestyle, and his immaturity, but he never denied that the choices were his. Infidelity became one of several cracks in a relationship already battling addiction, pressure, and relentless media scrutiny. What made Bobby Brown's story especially painful is how public everything became. Their fights, their struggles, and their heartbreak were all consumed by tabloids and television. Cheating wasn't an isolated issue. It fed into a cycle of mistrust and emotional damage that neither of them seemed equipped to escape. Over time, the love that once looked unstoppable turned volatile, and the marriage collapsed under the weight of unresolved pain. Looking back, Bobby Brown's infidelity is often seen as part of a larger cautionary tale. Not just about cheating, but about how fame can amplify flaws, how unhealed wounds can destroy even the deepest love, and how two incredibly talented people can still lose everything when accountability comes too late. 9.
I told her let's go, long as you know, 'cause I know when we...
Trey Songz built his entire image around desire. From the start of his career, he was marketed as a smooth talker, the late-night voice, the man who knew exactly what to say to make women feel wanted. His music leaned heavily into intimacy, temptation, and emotional vulnerability, and fans bought into it completely. Over time, that image stopped feeling like persona and started looking a lot like real life. Unlike some of the others on this list, Trey Songz was never tied to one long-term marriage. Instead, his pattern showed up through a series of high-profile relationships that always seemed to end the same way. Women he was linked to would disappear quietly, and soon after, hints would surface online suggesting overlapping conversations, divided attention, or emotional dishonesty. There were moments when screenshots, leaked messages, and subtle social media posts painted a picture of someone juggling multiple connections at once. What made Trey's reputation stick was consistency. The stories didn't come from one angry ex or a single scandal. They came from repeated situations that followed the same script, reinforcing the idea that commitment simply wasn't something he handled well. Even when things looked serious, there was always a sense that exclusivity was optional in his world. In Trey Songz's case, the line between art and behavior blurred completely. The man singing about late-night calls and stolen moments wasn't acting. His story became an example of how playing the role of a heartbreaker for too long can turn into a real pattern, one that leaves emotional damage behind even when no single scandal ever explodes publicly. 10.
Healing energy on me, baby, can you make a wish for...
Chris Brown's relationships have unfolded under an unforgiving spotlight, and over time, his love life became almost as public as his music. Early in his career, he was introduced as a clean-cut teenage star with limitless potential. But as fame grew, so did chaos, and his personal relationships began to reflect that instability. After his highly publicized and tragic split with Rihanna, the world watched closely to see if he would change. Instead, the pattern only shifted, not disappeared. His long on-and-off relationship with Karrueche Tran became the clearest example. From the outside, it looked like a couple constantly trying to make things work, but underneath, trust was never solid. Chris was repeatedly seen with other women, often while still claiming commitment. At one point, he was publicly reconnecting with Rihanna while still dating Karrueche, creating an emotional tug-of-war that left everyone involved exposed and hurt. The breaking point came in 2015, when news broke that Chris Brown had fathered a child with another woman, Nia Guzman. The most painful detail wasn't just the infidelity, but how it came out. Karrueche reportedly learned about the child the same way the public did, through the media. In that moment, the relationship was over for good. There was no apology that could undo that level of betrayal. Chris Brown's story isn't about a single bad decision. It's about repeated choices that showed a lack of respect for boundaries and honesty. Over time, his talent remained undeniable, but his reputation in relationships became defined by inconsistency and emotional fallout. It stands as a reminder that success and youth don't excuse betrayal, and that repeated cheating eventually costs more than any hit record can repay. 11.
Deli on nice, no shit. Ain't nothing chillin' but the deli on ice. Deli on die, got that belly tone nice.
Sean Diddy Combs has always lived life on a grand scale. Power, Influence, money, and access followed him everywhere, and his relationships were no different. For years, his most significant and meaningful relationship was with Kim Porter. They weren't married, but they share over a decade of history, raised children together, and were often described as a real family. To many people, Kim felt like the one constant in Diddy's chaotic world, but that stability came at a cost. Throughout their time together, Diddy was repeatedly linked to other women. Even while publicly presenting himself as committed to Kim, sometimes those relationships were brushed off as part of glamorous, open lifestyle, but it became increasingly clear that the arrangement wasn't equal. Kim later made it known that the constant disrespect and betrayal wore her down over time. The final breaking point came in 2007, when Kim discovered that Diddy had fathered a child with another woman, Sarah Chapman, while they were still together. The shock wasn't just the infidelity, but the timing. His daughter with Sarah was born only a month apart from the twins he shared with Kim. That moment made it impossible to ignore the pattern. For Kim, it wasn't about jealousy anymore, it was about dignity. Even after separating, Kim and Diddy remained close as co-parents, and she continued to speak about it with love and complexity rather than bitterness. But romantically, the damage was irreversible. Diddy's story reflects how power and unchecked freedom can blur accountability, and how repeated infidelity, even without marriage, can quietly destroy the deepest bond in a person's life. 12.
Her to be the main thing. Tryna lock her down, she ain't with the chain gang. Wanna make a wifey bud?
Fabulous built his reputation as a smooth-talking rapper with a polished image. His lyrics were confident, stylish, and often romantic, and over the years he became known as someone who moved with calm control rather than chaos. That made his long-term relationship with Emily Bustamante, known to many as Emily B, feel solid. They shared children, history, and a life that unfolded publicly, especially once reality television entered the picture. When Emily joined Love and Hip Hop, their relationship was no longer just personal. It became a storyline. Viewers watched as rumors of Fabulous being unfaithful surface again and again. Emily was often put in the uncomfortable position of responding to whispers, photos, and online speculation, all while cameras rolled. What made it difficult to watch was how familiar the pattern felt. This wasn't a single accusation that came and went. It was a recurring issue that kept reopening old wounds. The repeated allegations created a visible emotional toll. Emily was shown struggling with trust, frustration, and public embarrassment, while Fabulous maintained a reserved silence that only fueled more speculation. Even when they appeared to reconcile, the question of loyalty never fully disappeared. The relationship became a case study in how infidelity doesn't just hurt privately when fame is involved, it turns pain into entertainment. Despite everything, the two remained connected and continued building a family together, which only added complexity to their story. Fabulous' situation highlights how cheating doesn't always end relationships immediately. Sometimes it lingers, reshapes them, and leaves scars that never fully heal, especially when the world is watching every step. 13.
The corner thugs hustling for cars that cost dough. To the big dogs living large, taking it light, pushing big.
Nas has always been admired for his depth, intelligence, and lyrical honesty. As one of the greatest storytellers in hip-hop history, he built a reputation for introspection and authenticity, which made his real-life relationship with Khalees feel especially promising. When they married in 2005, fans saw them as a rare hip-hop and R&B power couple, two strong personalities blending creativity, style, and influence. From the outside, they looked solid, private, and grown. That image shattered in 2009, when Khalees filed for divorce while she was 7 months pregnant. The timing alone shocked people, and for years the reason behind the split remained mostly unspoken. Eventually, Khalees chose to speak her truth, and what she described was far from the calm, artistic partnership many had imagined. She talked about a marriage filled with intense conflict and emotional strain, and she confirmed long-standing rumors that infidelity played a role. According to Khalees, cheating wasn't just a rumor or a misunderstanding. It was something she was aware of and something that deeply damaged the foundation of their marriage. Trust eroded, resentment built, and the relationship became unsustainable. Coming to terms with betrayal while pregnant only added another layer of pain to an already difficult situation. Nas's story is one of contrast, a man celebrated for emotional awareness and lyrical wisdom, yet unable to protect the most important relationship in his life. It serves as a reminder that intelligence and talent don't automatically translate to emotional discipline, and that even the most respected voices can fall short when it comes to loyalty and accountability. 14.
What the fuck happened?
Now, every day is your birthday and I hit the flow. Every day is your birthday and I hit the flow.
Swizz Beatz' story sits at the intersection of love, timing, and public perception, and is one of the most debated relationship narratives in music culture. As a super producer, Swizz was already powerful and respected behind the scenes, creating hits for some of the biggest names in hip-hop and R&B. At the same time, he was married to Mas Honda, an R&B singer and the mother of a son. To the outside world, they looked like a creative, industry-connected couple building a life together. That image unraveled when Swizz began a relationship with Alicia Keys, one of the biggest and most admired singers in the world. The issue wasn't just that he moved on, but when and how. Mas Honda later claimed that Swizz and Alicia's relationship began while she and Swizz were still married, describing the experience as deeply painful and humiliating. She spoke openly about feeling replaced and disrespected, especially as the new relationship became public very quickly. Swizz and Alicia denied that there was any overlap, insisting that his marriage was already over by the time they got together. But Mas Honda never backed away from her version of events. And for years, the situation lived in a gray area where timelines, emotions, and truth clashed. What made the story sting for many was how quietly it unfolded compared to how loudly it affected the people involved. There were no dramatic videos or explosive interviews at first, just a slow realization that a marriage had ended while another love story was being written. With time, something rare happened. Instead of the bitterness lasting forever, the adults involved chose growth. Mas Honda, Swizz, and Alicia eventually worked toward peace, openly discussing co-parenting, forgiveness, and healing. Today, they present one of the few examples where a cheating controversy didn't end in permanent hostility. Still, Swizz Beatz' story remains a reminder that even when relationships move on successfully, the way one chapter ends can leave scars that don't disappear just because a new one begins. 15. Kevin Hart's story hit differently because it clashed so hard with the image he had worked to rebuild. After his first marriage ended, Kevin publicly positioned himself as a changed man, a devoted husband and father who had learned from past mistakes. His marriage to Aniko Parrish was presented as a fresh start, and for a while, it looked like he had finally found balance between fame and family. He spoke openly about growth, responsibility, and becoming a better man, and many people believed him. That image came crashing down in 2017. A compromising video surfaced showing Kevin with another woman in a Las Vegas hotel room, and there was no room for denial. What made the situation especially painful was the timing. Aniko was 8 months pregnant when the scandal broke. Almost overnight, Kevin went from comedy's most successful feel-good star to the center of a very public reckoning. The situation escalated further when he revealed he was being extorted over the video, forcing him to address everything head-on. Instead of hiding, Kevin went online and issued a public apology to his wife and children. It wasn't polished or humorous. It was uncomfortable, emotional, and raw. Later, in his documentary series, he allowed cameras into the aftermath, showing tense conversations, broken trust, and the slow, painful process of accountability. For the first time, audiences saw the real cost of his actions beyond headlines and jokes. Kevin Hart's infidelity wasn't framed as a long-term pattern, but was a devastating moment that tested everything he claimed to stand for. His story stands as a reminder that personal growth isn't proven by words or branding, but by consistent behavior, and that even one reckless decision can undo years of trust when the stakes are high. 16. Offset's relationship with Cardi B has played out almost entirely in public, and from the beginning, it was intense, passionate, and volatile. They fell for each other fast, married quietly in 2017, and soon welcomed their daughter. To fans, their chemistry was undeniable, and despite the chaos around them, it often felt like they were deeply in love. But love wasn't the problem. Trust was. Not long after their marriage became known, videos and messages surfaced showing Offset in compromising situations with other women. Cardi was visibly hurt, but chose to stay, believing in forgiveness and growth. Unfortunately, the scandals didn't stop. Over time, more rumors, leaked DMs, and accusations emerged, each one reopening the same wound. What made it worse was how often Cardi seemed to find out alongside the rest of the world. The emotional toll was clear. Cardi spoke openly about feeling embarrassed, frustrated, and exhausted by having to defend her relationship while being repeatedly disrespected. At one point, she filed for divorce, explaining that she was tired of the constant fighting and disappointment. Even when they reconciled, the trust issues never fully disappeared, and the public was left watching a cycle repeat itself. Offset's story isn't about one bad decision. It's about a pattern that followed him into marriage and parenthood. Despite his success and talent, his inability to remain faithful became a defining struggle in his relationship. It shows how repeated infidelity can wear down even the strongest emotional bond, especially when every mistake is made under a spotlight that never turns off. 17. Tristan Thompson's name became synonymous with public betrayal, not because of one scandal, but because of how consistently the same behavior repeated itself. As an NBA player, he lived in a world of fame, money, and constant access, but his relationship with Khloe Kardashian pulled his personal life into an even brighter spotlight. From the beginning, their romance was highly visible, and many people hoped that becoming a father would ground him and bring stability. That hope didn't last long. In 2018, videos and photos surfaced showing Tristan with other women, and the timing made it especially cruel. The news broke just days before Khloe gave birth to their daughter, True. While she was preparing to welcome their child, the world was watching evidence of his infidelity circulate online. Despite the humiliation and heartbreak, Khloe chose to stay, try and protect her family and give their relationship another chance. But the pattern didn't stop. In 2019, Tristan was caught again, this time in a situation that cut even deeper. He was exposed to being involved with Jordan Woods, a close friend of Khloe's sister. The betrayal wasn't just romantic. It fractured family trust and dominated headlines for months. Once again, apologies followed, and once again, reconciliation happened, leaving many people wondering whether anything had truly changed. The final blow came in 2021, when it was revealed that Tristan had fathered a child with another woman, Marilee Nichols, during a period when he and Khloe were reportedly back together. This time, there was no confusion, no rumors, and no excuses left to lean on. It confirmed what many had already suspected. The cheating wasn't accidental. It was habitual. Tristan Thompson's story became a cautionary tale about patterns ignored, forgiveness exhausted, and how repeated betrayal can eventually erase even the strongest desire to believe someone will change. 18. Adam Levine spent years reshaping his public image from reckless heartthrob to settled family man. As the frontman of Maroon 5, his voice carried strong R&B influence, and his early reputation as a serial dater was almost expected in the industry. But when he married supermodel Bahati Prinsloo in 2014, many people believed that phase of his life was over. They built a family together, welcomed children, and Adam appeared calmer, more grounded, and fully committed. By 2022, they had even announced they were expecting another child, reinforcing the idea that he had truly grown into his role as a husband and father. That image unraveled abruptly when an Instagram model, Sumner Stroh, came forward with screenshots of private messages allegedly sent by Adam. The messages were flirtatious, inappropriate, and crossed clear boundaries for a married man. What made the situation explode wasn't just one set of messages, but the flood that followed. Other women soon shared similar DMs, revealing a pattern rather than an isolated interaction. The internet reacted instantly, turning the scandal into a viral moment filled with disbelief, jokes, and criticism. The most unsettling detail was how casual the messages appeared, as if Adam didn't fully grasp the consequences of what he was doing. One claimed that he allegedly asked permission to name his unborn child after one of the women he was messaging, pushed the situation from scandal into outright shock. Whether intention or thoughtlessness, it shattered the carefully built narrative of maturity and respect that surrounded him. Adam Levine later issued a public statement, admitting he had crossed the line emotionally while denying any physical affair. He took responsibility for hurting his family and said he was committed to rebuilding trust with his wife. Still, the damage to his image lingered. His story became a reminder that growth isn't just about settling down publicly, but about discipline behind closed doors, and that even emotional infidelity can carry consequences as heavy as anything physical when trust is broken. 19. Case's name was pulled back into the spotlight years after his peak, not because of a comeback record, but because of an old accusation that reopened unresolved 1990s R&B drama. His former fiancée claimed that their relationship ended after she discovered he had been unfaithful, and the woman she named was none other than Mary J. Blige, one of the most respected voices in R&B. The allegation immediately caught attention, not just because of who was involved, but because it suggested betrayal within a close-knit musical circle where personal and professional lives often overlapped. The story struck a nerve because of the era it came from. In the 90s, R&B artists often moved in the same studios, tours, and social spaces, creating blurred boundaries between friendships, collaborations, and romantic relationships. According to the accusation, what hurt most wasn't just the cheating itself, but a feeling of being blindsided by someone within the same industry ecosystem, where trust was assumed but not guaranteed. It painted a picture of quiet rivalries and private betrayals hidden behind smooth vocals and polished public images. Neither Case nor Mary J. Blige ever publicly confirmed the allegation, and over time it faded into industry lore rather than proven fact. Still, when the claim resurfaced years later, it reminded fans that behind the soulful love songs and emotional performances, the R&B world was just as messy and complicated as any other. The situation became less about proving what did or didn't happen, and more about how fame, proximity, and temptation often collided in ways that left personal damage long after the music stopped playing. 20. Stevie Wonder's personal life has often been kept in softer focus compared to his towering musical legacy, but during his marriage to Syreeta Wright in the 1970s, rumors of infidelity quietly followed him. At the time, both were deeply embedded in the Motown world, surrounded by studios that never slept, late-night sessions, touring schedules, and an industry where boundaries were constantly blurred. Whispers circulated about studio flings and backstage encounters, the kind of stories that rarely made headlines but lived on in industry conversations. What made the situation emotionally complicated wasn't just the rumors themselves, but the context of their relationship. Stevie and Syreeta shared a bond that went beyond marriage. She wasn't only his wife, she was his creative partner, co-writing some of his most heartfelt songs and helping shape a defining era of his sound. To fans, their connection felt soulful and genuine, rooted in music and mutual respect. That's why the idea of betrayal, even as rumor, carried weight. It suggested tension between artistic intimacy and personal commitment, a struggle many musicians face when their lives revolve around creativity and constant access. Neither Stevie nor Syreeta ever publicly turned their marriage into a battlefield of accusations. When they divorced in 1972, they did so quietly, without scandal-filled interviews or public blame. In fact, they continued working together afterward, a detail that speaks volumes about the complexity of their bond. Whether the rumors were exaggerated or grounded in truth, they became part of the larger narrative about how fame and temptation often test even the most spiritually connected relationships. Stevie Wonder's story in this chapter is less about confirmed wrongdoing and more about how genius, proximity, and human weakness can coexist in ways that are rarely simple or clean.